This is the Home Front on Substack Live. Thank you so much for joining me. I am your host, Reed Yellin. Today, I am joined by the one and only Jessica Yellin. Jessica is the founder of News Not Noise, going back to 2018. If you do not follow her here on Substack, you should on Instagram or wherever it is. Guys, millions, hundreds of thousands of people follow you, Jessica, because you give people the straight dope. You don't highlight it. You don't make it crazy. You don't bend it one way or the other. You give it straight. So tell us just a touch about News but Not Noise. And then I'm going to ask you, I'm turning the tables on you today. I'm asking you the questions.
Hi. First of all, it's so nice to finally talk to you and to be here with you. Thank you. The whole concept of News Not Noise is we are all overwhelmed and panicked by what's happening in the news. And sometimes a lot of outlets put spin on it that emphasizes why you should be panicked. And my approach is to try to keep you calm, try to keep you grounded, give you enough facts so that you feel like you at least understand what's happening. Because one strategy for me has always been I find calm through feeling like I understand the information. So I try to empower people with information and do my best to also remind them of what's good in the world.
So let's talk about this. I mean, you and I were texting back and forth, and you noted, and I've seen this in my own life, is how many people are saying basically no news is no news. I don't want to hear about it. I don't want to see it. In fact, my mother was saying that, with some of our relatives, they now have a no politics rule at the dinner table. You talk about movies, books, what's going on in town, but you cannot talk about politics.
And I have friends who are doctors, like gastroenterologists, allergists, whatever, and they say they tell their patients don't listen to the news because it creates anxiety. So it creates too much anxiety. My own view is that it's actually okay to step away from the news sometimes. Like if you feel too overwrought, that's a good signal to take a break so that you can come back feeling stronger and ready. None of us can afford to step away. I mean, obviously, anybody who's watching us knows we can't afford to entirely step away because it's up to us to make sure we keep this country or get this country on track so that rule of law still matters in the future our kids inherit.
Well, so let's talk about some of the things that we started at the end. Now we're going to go to the beginning.
Okay.
So we started in medias res, as they would call it in drama. So let's talk about that. So we're seeing an escalation from the Trump administration. Jessica, I feel like they started with a bang, figuratively or literally. They sort of had this. They sort of slowed down in the spring, right around like Liberation Day. Maybe that was because they were freaked out about the market. And now it seems like that the Trump administration has ramped up again. And obviously we see with troops in D.C., we see with people, ICE, being given 183,000 new officers or whatever it is. We saw this morning, John Bolton's house was being raided for classified documents of all things. So tell us how you see that escalation in the context of, again, trying to provide an outlet for folks that is not so scary that people just turn off their phones.
Okay. Well, that last part made this impossible to answer because the truth is, back in the day, I used to be able to say, listen, this is happening, but here's some historical context. Here's how things could work, resolve themselves. So it was about showing people why you shouldn't race to the worst conclusion, right? That there are other ways this could end. Right now, we're seeing the kinds of things that we only read about in books, we only saw in movies. And to deny that the rule of law is being violated, that justice is being weaponized, would just be to create a fiction. So, I think especially today with what we saw at John Bolton's house, to me, that was a meaningful escalation. So far, he's, launched these investigations of people like Miles Taylor and, others that he considered enemies. Right. I think this is the first time we've seen the Justice Department act on it and physically target one of his perceived enemies in that way. I should say at least of the elites, right? I have seen something similar with ICE because I live in LA, so we've been exposed to the militarization of the city and the undemocratic approach that these faux agents, ICE, whatever you want, they're like dudes who've been recruited to do whatever they want for a bounty, it seems.
I know, they went and got a pair like a Carhartt pants and a blue T-shirt, right?
And you're in, right? It's just...
It doesn't take much more.
There's seemingly zero training, and I think that what they were doing is testing what they could get away with. So they
Mhm.
tried the troops here for a while, it went on, and then they pulled it back, but they saw that they could get away with it, and then the ICE has shown them that violent takedowns of mom and dads who are working people all over America are tolerated as long as they're a certain category of people. And generally, it's Black and brown people, mostly brown people, right? Latinos. And so they've gotten away with it, and they're turning the notch up further and militarizing more of our cities. And it's frightening to me what they'll allow agents to do in time. I really do think, I know I'm talking for a long time, but I
No,
really do
please.
the strategy they've used with ICE is extremely surprising to me, both how unprofessional these agents are, violent they are, openly and in public, and that so much of America looks the other way. I think because I'm having conversations with people who tell me they're not seeing this stuff in their feeds. It's not, they don't believe that ICE is doing what it's doing. And because we're in such bubbles, a lot of us don't really know. It's giving the Trump administration a big leeway and permission to keep doing this stuff. And my fear is it gets too late by the time enough people notice to want to stop it.
So Miles and I actually had a conversation that touched on a lot of this last week, Jessica. And the one thing I can tell you is that history is not on our side in this regard. And that was the one thing that Miles and I talked about, which is the idea that most people don't know that this is real, or they don't take it seriously until it shows up on their doorstep. But by the time that happens, enough of this will have happened elsewhere that they've heard and seen it. And so now, right, that knock on the door, right, the fear of a knock on the door creates that what do they call it? I call it premature capitulation, right?
Right.
Which is I see nothing, I hear nothing, I say nothing, because it's not worth the trouble, right? That whole, if I ignore politics, politics will ignore me. It never does, right? But that's the hope, and so I think that's right. And there's the Werner Herzog quote, right, which is 1/3 of the country is doing this, while 1/3 of the country is okay with it, and the other third of the country ignores it, right? And so, and I think that's what we're seeing is again, it is, if you live on the west side of LA, what happened in downtown, unless you were watching the news, you probably didn't know what was going on, right? Because there's just such a physical and frankly cultural and everything else separation between those two places. If you don't know anything about Washington D.C. other than you went there on your eighth grade trip, your kid went there on their eighth grade trip, or you think it's a crime-ridden hellscape full of people you don't like anyway, then you're like, man, well, maybe they should clean up the streets. Right? Yeah. I mean, if they say it's crime ridden, they must be right. And we do have a significant, not only during Trump but pre-Trump, we as a culture have had a significant deference to law enforcement and to the idea of national security, which is this is in your best interest. I mean, how many times have we heard that in the last 25
Yeah,
years, right?
totally.
Or 75 years, whatever it is. And so that idea of order and security, which has always been used to do things to the populace that the populace would not otherwise allow, is now being taken to a whole other level.
And, I'd add to that, fully endorse, part of the challenge we have is the framing people see in media. And I don't mean traditional media. I mean
Hmm.
all of media. What we have a practice of doing is there's like this protest is going on when the troops came to LA that you're referring to in downtown LA, the anti-ICE protest where the troops came in. And cameras, of course, zoom in on the where there's fire.
Right.
I mean that symbolically and literally. There's
If
a
it bleeds, it leads.
Right. And so there's one police car on fire with a couple people surrounding it, some guy on the top waving a flag, and that is the image. And that's the image that's used as a stand-in for all of what this whole city must look like. People would say to me, "Are you safe? Are you home? Is it?" Meantime, I have friends who have young children who were in that protest. There were face paintings in that protest, people playing banjos. Like we need to open the aperture. We need to zoom out so we can see this in context. And that's what we're not getting enough of. There are isolated incidents that are driving the entire narrative around Trump's crackdown. And the rest of us who want people to see something different need to show where it's sitting in situ, how it stands in relation to everything else. And we're not effectively figuring out how to do that yet.
Well, and that's my follow-up to that. So, you have a channel that I think probably brings in a pretty broad swath of people from across the country, across demographics, across ideologies. Um, so how do we find more people like you to say that? How do we find more people who, are not necessarily talking to a national audience, but are trying to communicate to, those people who are like looking at their phones going, just shaking their head like there they go again.
Right.
How do you do that? Is that because it seems right now like the folks who are watching us, and almost 750 people watching us, and thank you so much. That's very flattering. The folks that are watching us are probably already likely very attuned politically. They already have the Substack app, great, or they're watching on their laptops. So they're already pretty informed. How do we get to those folks who aren't necessarily uninformed, but as you said, they lack context? They see it, but they're not getting the whole picture, as you said.
We have to be creative about finding them where they're spending their time. If it's, gardening groups, if it's sports fantasy leagues, if it's, cooking. I think there are other ways to reach people. I think more people come in as we get closer to the election. I mean, one of the truths right now is I think so many people feel there's nothing they can do about anything anyway, so they may as well not look because it's too painful. And my hope is that as we approach the midterms, and you know how this goes, like, don't we start midterm races as soon as Labor Day's over? Like, maybe that'll get people more engaged next year, et cetera. But I do think we have to, it's the most boring term possible. We do have to start thinking about how do we rebuild the center. And the minute you say the center, people go, like, no, I don't know why I'm bored by that term, right? Like, it's not exciting, but that is where the heart of that's a huge chunk of our country. And so many people who are center right, center left feel homeless. And we have to come up with ways to engage that community collectively, right? And I don't know, do you have answers?
Not enough, clearly. But look, I left the Republican Party better than a decade ago. I am not a Democrat. I guess I'm a wayward independent politically. Because the truth is, I've had quite the evolution, which is for another episode, but, I don't match up right, particularly well, certainly a lot less with the Republican Party than I used to, but there are things about the Democratic Party that bother me too. So maybe I'm the infamous swing voter or whatever now, which is weird. But I would say that to your point, like we can't if we put everything through a partisan lens, then that's how people are going to
Right.
accept it too. I think, which is you're asking me to take the right position, the left position, the Trump position, the anti-Trump position, and whatever filter we're putting on it. And look, I am plenty biased. I am not part of a political party, but I am 100% partisan on behalf of the country. I think what we're seeing is bad and we should not do it anymore. But that means we also have to say, okay, well, what would you do instead? And I think a lot of times that is the big part that's missing, Jessica, for me. Is I was talking to Tom Nichols. I interviewed Tom Nichols a couple of days ago, and we talked about USAID. I got to be honest with you. I grew up in Washington, D.C. I had friends that worked at USAID 20 years ago. I had no idea what it did, right, until it got shut down. I had no idea how much money it was spending on things that are either made or grown here and paid for by the government to Americans and then shipped overseas. Like, we don't do a very good job, or our government hasn't done a very good job of connecting why these things matter to citizens' lives. So if you say Harvard's under attack, a lot of people go,
I don't care.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's Harvard. They're going to be fine. Well, they get all this funding for research. They get how much? They get how much funding for what? And so again, if you're not connecting why those things matter to individual Americans or to their lives or their families, I think that it gets lost in the ether because people, like, they got lots of stuff going on in their lives, right? And as we talked about at the top, if this is going to be one more thing that makes their lives harder or their day a little darker, they're like,
I don't want to listen. I can't.
Look, football season's coming. The kids are going back to school. We support fantasy. I got my fantasy draft next Friday, right? Like, I got to work on that because I finish last every year, whatever it is, right? Which is true, unfortunately. But that's the thing. How do we give, right? How do we give people, not look? We shouldn't put rose-colored glasses on. I think we are in a very difficult time that we are frankly likely to be in for a while. But how do we give them, and this is what we do at the union, is how do we give them other positive outlets with which to take whatever frustration, anger, sadness, resentment might be, and channel that into something that's healthy as opposed to corrosive.
And one of the things that experts in, these changes in government advise is in-person gatherings in your community, right? Just like getting together with people in your neighborhood, people you know, and you don't even have to don't talk politics. But
No.
it's like we're so isolated in addition to it that having those in-person local connections makes a difference. And reminding one thing I do is I do a segment called Doing Something where I remind people of who's doing something about a problem. Not politics. Like, there's no more gardens in our community. We need a local community garden. We need help for some of the autistic kids who don't have access to services in this one town. You can do something, and that really transforms your mood and your sense of what's possible in the world.
Right. Because again, for all of this stuff we talk about at the national level, and it is very important and it is determinative of so many things, the truth is that what happens on your street, in your town, in your zip code is, at your kid's school, at your office is going to be far more impactful to your daily, weekly, monthly, and yearly life than what a bunch of assholes are doing in Washington, D.C. This administration not, being fully accepted,
Yeah.
which is, to your point, whether or not it's ICE, it's the Marines in Los Angeles or ICE in Washington, D.C., or, feds at John Bolton's house, like these are all indicators of what is to come. And we should not deny that.
Can I ask you, because today the Trump said that the Guard can carry guns in
Mhm.
DC, and he's considering a more broad takeover. You keep referring to what this is headed to. What do you think this is headed to?
Well, it depends on whether or not I want that number to go from 895 to up or 895 to
Okay, we don't
0.
have to discuss it. Ratings
No,
first.
wait,
Ratings
no,
first.
we should, no, I think that it's hard because again, if the folks who are tuning in, right, like we're so tuned in, that it's hard to believe he's only been back in office 7 months and he's got 3.5 years to go. We shouldn't, if there's anything you can be a lot of things, guys. Don't be surprised, right? Whatever you see, you don't have to be okay with it. You don't have to accept it as normal or good or just or okay or even legal. But just like Jessica, I think one of the things going back to 2015 when Donald Trump came down the escalator was the entire country, with the exception, I don't want to say the entire, half the country, especially those of us who think we're supposed to know better, had a catastrophic lack of imagination, right? Just catastrophic. And we keep doing it. We keep not understanding what could happen. And I think there's a lot to see in history, which is this is likely to get worse before it gets better. He's not up for reelection again, right? I mean, well, theoretically. And I have to
Right.
keep putting that modifier up, which is really frustrating in and of itself. Shows you where we are. And so for me, there's let's go back to what can you do? I mean, to me, I think that it is likely to get worse for those people you noted earlier, for the people who it is already bad for, right? These guys, look, guys, you can say a lot about whatever you want about Donald Trump, but the people around him are very smart people. They are very sophisticated. They know what they're doing. There's a reason why they put all those cuts in this bill from a couple of months ago or last month to take place after the midterm, right? So that God forbid, they lose and God forbid that, they maintain the House, they'll just say it's the Democrats' fault anyway. And if the Democrats retake the House, they'll blame them for the cuts, right? Like this is all very easy to understand. So I think that we have to understand that he is different than other lame duck presidents, which is they all still fear him. The Republicans all still fear him. They're all still willing to go along. You can see that, his poll numbers are down. Yeah, but like he's got everything he wanted to do legislatively, he's gotten done, right? Not one, one guy, Thomas Massey from Kentucky is like the only holdout on any of this stuff. There were a few things in the Senate they didn't like, but eventually they all got back in line. We should expect that that's how it's going to be for the next 15 months, 13, 14 months, whatever it is. And for the rest of his presidency, it's going to be chaos, ugliness. And then, as you know, even if he decides to leave office, right? If he decides to leave office normally, the end of his presidency is not going to be normal. And so I think now is the time to really, figure out your mutual aid network, right? Like figure out how you're going to take care of your family, how you're going to take care of your friends, how you're going to take care of your community, because there's going to be so much else that is unfortunately out of our control.
I'm afraid I agree with you.
All right, let me ask this. So you have been, you were at CNN for like 17 years, I think, something like that.
I was in the news for 17 years, but I was at ABC and NBC, and then I was at CNN, MSNBC.
All right, so so you've been in the news media. You live in LA. So let me ask you this. I mean, the crypto guys are riding high. The tech guys are riding high, right? The private equity guys are riding high.
AI,
Um,
yeah.
AI is riding high. Hollywood crickets.
Oh,
Other than Tim Cook is like delivering gold-plated iPhones to the Oval Office. Like, what if Hollywood was supposed to be such a bastion of liberal, big L liberal, right? Activism. Like, where the hell is everybody?
they're terrified. I mean, they're a business too, and I have, this is not new about Hollywood, but it was always individual
Right.
actors who were outspoken. And what's happened is, all the studios and creative shops have gotten bought by either publicly traded companies, global conglomerates, or take investment and want investment from, external funders who are themselves exposed to political actions by the president. And so
Right.
everybody, because Trump has sued all these news outlets that are owned by these media conglomerates for huge amounts of money, everybody is being, I shouldn't say everybody, but most of the entities here are cowed into silence. And I don't know if it'll change in the next year. It's not only Hollywood, it's corporate America too. Like, I've had conversations with people who are advisors to CEOs or CEOs themselves who are grappling with, like, on the one hand, my conscience and morals say I should speak out. On the other, it's not gonna change anything, and he's gonna punish our business, and I have a fiduciary duty to my shareholders and investors. So this is the double bind people are caught in. I don't think that is an excuse for not speaking out. That's what courage is. That's why there is courage. That's what the word courage means. But there's a lot of conflict out here, and it's especially pronounced in Hollywood because there's so much self-righteousness around the politics when they do speak out, that
Right.
their silence when it costs them is quite noteworthy. I will say the one exception has been South Park, and they've
Yeah.
been spectacular.
Yeah. No, but I mean, look, they've been doing it for almost 30 years, I think, right? I mean, like there's never been a sacred cow they weren't willing to absolutely put on the
And
barbecue.
they just got a
So,
billion-dollar deal, so they're doing okay.
right, from a guy who theoretically should be aligned with the president, whose dad certainly is aligned with the president, right?
And he
You talk. Go ahead.
and he's shown that they did reorganize 60 Minutes. He has made, yeah. It's not like the parent company has been, so fierce in resisting the president.
Right. And so many of them haven't, right? Whether or not
They've
ABC
complied.
capitulated,
Yeah.
right? They complied, and I mean, let me ask a question, because I think I heard Kara Swisher talking about this when she was talking to somebody about trade deals, which was the idea. And I'm going to ask you about the media here. Is do some of these people just keep quiet because they're just trying to wait him out? He'll be gone soon enough. It's 3 years for all of us. 3 years can seem like a long time, but the truth is, in our business, 3 years, we're scheduling shows and movies already. We're doing this, we're doing that. Corporations are planning for months, maybe years out. Do you think there's any of that, which is, again, let's just hold on tight, keep our heads down, keep our head below the parapet, and maybe come January 2029, the sun will shine again?
For sure. I think that's part of it. I also think in this conversation, we have to acknowledge Hollywood is like suffocating on the floor. The business, apart from Trump, is really struggling right now because of streaming. And so they're also in like existential survival. And part of it's like, dude, I just got to get a gig, or I just got to get my show on the air. I can't even, like what we were talking about before, they're very much like, I can't even think about politics right now. Will I have a job in 2 years? That applies to actors, writers, studio heads, creatives at all levels, producers. So I think there's a lot of, you know, what we're seeing, this revolutionary change that tech is bringing to so many industries, especially the media, has hit Hollywood so hard in the last, call it 3 years, that they're really focusing on what it takes to keep going. And Trump is now like a secondary concern.
Well, and you talked about all the people sort of at the top of the call sheet, but all of those people who don't get a gig whose script doesn't get greenlit has a downstream effect of all of the crew, the craft
Totally.
service, the people who
Gaffers.
tutor the kids, yeah, all of those people, right? Which is a massive economy in and of itself of often working class people who make real money, make good money in a place like LA, which is very expensive. But again, when those things shut down at the top, when that funnel turns off at the top, it has a massive downstream effect.
I have restaurant owner friends who are struggling because of this, because fewer people in LA are eating out because Hollywood is really suffocating. And you now can't make movies in LA more or less because of the cost. So people are making movies in Europe and in Canada and anywhere else. So this whole city, which is built on Hollywood to a large extent, is really struggling right now. And it's definitely that ripple effect is being felt across LA.
Right. And again, if I don't know that the studios are necessarily going to leave, right? It's still a company town. But again, what does that look like? And then, you mentioned just offhandedly, but you bring in AI, right? Like how many, with the exception of South Park, which probably now uses a lot more sophisticated technology to make their cartoon than they did their animation than they did 30 years ago, right? They're still writing it. They're still doing it. But how much of this now, like, the guys who used to design this stuff, the guys who were the illustrators, right? How much of all of that stuff goes away too? And I was actually reading a Substack post the other night, maybe it was last night, Jessica, where the guys like, AI companies like do not scrape or something. Like he literally put a disclaimer on the bottom, like you're not allowed to steal my
Oh,
stuff.
don't scrape my stuff. Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I mean, some
Right.
of this was written into the contracts in the last negotiation, but it wasn't nearly far reaching enough. And some people think it made it worse. One theory I've heard is that in the not too distant future, we might be able to turn on our TV and say, hey, whatever, TV Siri, can you give me a hour and 45-minute romantic comedy with thriller elements that has Cary Grant, Julia Roberts, and the humor of Seth Rogen? I'm going to make dinner. I'll be back soon. And then it makes the movie for you. Now, that seems based on my experiences with AI and how overstated they say the skills of it are compared to what it always delivers. I'm not so confident it's going to do that, but that is one of the fears that is lurking here in Hollywood.
Well, I can tell you that I have a friend who's in the sort of AI-ish business / entertainment business, and she just went to a conference that she was helping set up where they basically created little phone booths where you could do just that. And at the end of a 5 or 7 minute, process, it would deliver not the movie, but like a 2.5 minute trailer. So what you're talking about, somebody's already doing. Again, it's maybe not an hour and 45 minutes,
Or
but
that
they're
good.
already creating the right. I don't know. I'll have to ask her. I'm going to see her tomorrow night, so I will ask
Okay,
her
let
how
me
it
know.
came out. But yeah, but to your point, it's going to change everything, and maybe we'll have a massive who are the people in England who threw the gears? Luddite. Maybe we'll have a massive Luddite reaction, and it'll be 330 million Americans who go out and touch grass, except for Super Bowl Sunday, right? I'm not counting
Love
on
it.
it. Right. But I hope that's, that there's some reaction to that. I hope that there is still, the thing about AI, and you could fool around with it on ChatGPT and all this other stuff is as as someone who writes a lot, like I don't know that I could outsource my writing to something like that. Right. I might ask it questions from a data perspective or a factual perspective, which it might not even be perfect for, but at least give it a sense of it. But I don't think I could give it up, if that makes sense. I could be like, give me 700 words on redistricting, right? Like, I
No.
don't think I could do
Here's
that.
what I think it's good for is, I want to say that this is like authoritarianism, but that's too strong a word. And I don't want to say it's just overreach. What's another way what are some other phrases? And then I think it's effective for that. It'll give you a list, and often it just triggers an idea.
Hmm.
It's
Yeah.
almost like an editor. If you use it like an editor, it can be great.
Yeah. And look, I mean, again, the one thing about the phones that you and I are both talking on is that it has access to every last bit of human knowledge that's ever been created. Right. And so from that perspective, yeah. I mean, I just remember, you could probably appreciate this too. I remember being in fifth grade. Fifth grade, and our teacher told us to go to the library and figure out what the Homestead Acts were.
Right.
Well, after we figured out that it was acts, ACTS, not an axe, AXE, right? Because we were in fifth grade. We had to go to the library, we had to go to the Dewey Decimal System, like all that stuff. And then like finally, like after half an hour, like we figured out what the heck it was. Right. But let me ask you that. Is there something lost in the fact that we can tap it into our phone and get the answer without actually having to go figure out how to find the information first? Is that a necessary step, or am I just stuck in the 1980s?
Somebody was reminding me that when they were young, somebody who's now in their 50s, that before they went on a trip, the whole family would pull out a map of the country, sit around a table, and draw the route. And in the drawing of the route, they'd have a conversation about, what do you want to do here? What do you want to see? Oh my gosh, did you know? And they'd teach their kids about. So I think it's more the interactivity and what do they call it? Serendipity, the
Yeah.
serendipity of what discovery looks like, right? I find I'm able to have some of that with AI, because it does present things to you that you hadn't thought of in that way, and you can go down a path. I just find that it's often so deeply wrong that if I
Right.
didn't have the depth of knowledge I already have, I would be completely ill-informed. Some of them still think Trump's not president again. And I have to
Right.
sing to it every time. It's 2025. Trump is president. Please don't hallucinate. Don't make up quotes. Don't lie to me.
Actually, I'm looking at the comments here, and
Are they mad?
Hannah
They're
asked,
mad.
no, no, not at all. It's great. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Hannah asks a really interesting question about AI. Really hope you'll discuss the disastrous climate impacts. The benefits for everyday use are not worth the cost to humanity. And so, as they build these data centers and the corresponding cogeneration that you need, right? They take up an enormous amount of electricity, an enormous amount of water, everything else. Like, how do we make sure that an industry that is likely to be on the ledger a massive consumer of resources, not a massive generator of jobs, right? At least not for a mass population. How do we make sure that there's some balance there? I know that's a policy question. I'm sorry, but like Hannah brought up something I thought was really interesting, so I
It's a
wanted to get
great
to you.
question. I mean, I've interviewed some people about this, and not that this is, I don't want to sound like I'm justifying anything. I'm sharing what I've learned, which is
Mm,
we're going to have a solution. Like, it's going to be solved in about 8 years.
okay.
And I'm like, so what about now till 8 years? And they're like, yeah. So
Right.
I don't, one of the things I'm learning is that these data centers, they do consume crazy amounts of energy and water. And the water is recycled. It's not constantly new, is what I understand. Have
Mhm.
you heard different? That's what I think.
I haven't heard anything other than I lived in California for 10 years and fought the water wars. So it's never
It's never
100%,
enough.
right? You're
Yeah,
you're losing something every time.
something. And I think that it's listen, we are on this train, right? These tech dudes have built this train and we're riding it. And we have to figure out how we can make it as safe and healthy and enjoyable and life affirming as possible and supportive to everybody. I don't know how we stop the train.
All right. And Tom says water is heated and cooled, but doesn't go away. Thank you, Tom. Thank you for the thermodynamics or hydrodynamics lesson, because I would not have known that. Okay. Let's stay in California, move away from AI and something else, still map related, still probably drawn mostly by hand, but probably computer aided, which is redistricting. The
Yeah.
redistricting wars are upon us. So in Texas, the legislature did what they do. I didn't Tom DeLay go to jail for this like 20 years ago or 25 years ago?
That was a lifetime ago.
It was
Oh,
a
we're allowed
lifetime
to
ago.
do that now.
We were in a whole different universe then. So they have they have put forward new maps. If the Texas State Senate hasn't voted on them, they will soon, and then Abbott will for sure sign it. So now in California, Governor Gavin Newsom has gone through the legislative process. Just small note of history: I helped pass Prop 11 in 2008. So
Wow.
this is like all things come back together to allow the legislature, the California legislature, to draw the maps instead of the normal California Redistricting Commission, which happens every 10 years. They have to put this on the ballot November 4th. And if it passes, then these maps that the California legislature has drawn, I think, pick up 5 seats for
5.
Democrats in California. So give us on the ground in LA, in California, what's the mood there about all this?
So the general sentiment is that it's likely to pass, but it's not as immediately popular as one would expect from a left blue state as California,
Hmm.
right? So the overwhelming mood is this will happen and this should happen, and that's how voters here feel. But they're going to have to they're going to have to build a campaign to make sure that the majority votes that way. And the other, because, Schwarzenegger and others are arguing against it. They want a good government. They want to stay out of the, what are we calling this? An arms race, a redistricting arms race, right? The question is
Which
like,
it really always has been in the states where that was possible, right? It's not
uh,
like the partisans in states didn't do this.
and I hear people saying now, I think we have 9 Republicans in the House and they're redrawing 5 seats. I hear people saying, why are we only doing 5? Why not do 9? And so you're seeing all flavors right now. I think it's going to pass. I think that there's an interest in having it pass by an overwhelming majority so that it's not a contested thing, and that could incent other blue states to feel comfortable doing this too. And so I think bottom line, there's going to be a lot of money spent on ads. So whoever's in the ad and political consulting business is going to be very happy working in California for the next few
Well,
months.
listen, I mean, the ballot measure business, which I was in for 10 years, that is, talk about an arms race, right? People
Yeah.
think, oh, there's so much money in politics. Until you have spent a season in ballot measure land in California, you really don't understand
Wow.
money
Maybe I
in
should get into that.
politics.
I will
Oh, yeah,
say
no,
also
it's
Gavin
a whole different
Newsom
deal.
is really, standing out right now in this moment as the person who's most willing to be the pugilist going head to head with Trump and Abbott in this moment. And, he's getting that viral love with all these like Obama girl kind of treatment online. Um, yeah, we'll see. I know a lot of people who are loving him for this. People who weren't his big fans until now are loving him for it. We'll see how this pans out long term. Do you think it's a
Well,
win for him?
I mean, I think he's on a winning streak at the moment. I think that, as you know, the Democratic primary process, we're in the shadow primary for the next couple of years, but people start building out, federal committees and super PACs and all that other stuff. But the truth is that nobody in Iowa or South Carolina, wherever the heck they decide to start it in 2028, right, is going to go to a caucus or pull a ballot for the next 3 years. So I would say that it's great for him. Maybe he's winning some converts. He's probably got a lot of donors calling him, right, that maybe weren't interested before, and so that helps. But it's a long road. They're going to have like what you'll probably have to do that thing where they have 2 nights worth of debates because there's going to be like 40 of them running. So it's all well and good. But he has to pass this first. And
Right.
look, this is the other part too about ballot measures, which is a ballot measure is what the title and summary say and what the body of the text says. But for a voter, the ballot measure is whatever they hear the most of. And so if you are trying to win it, it is this is best for you. And they're doing, I guarantee you, they're spending an outrageous amount of money on polling and data and focus groups and everything else, right, to figure out what the messaging is. The bad guys have 2 options. One is this is going to kill your grandmother or some other really awful outcome for you. The second, Jessica, is confusion. Confusion almost always equals a no vote. So you don't necessarily have to get somebody to oppose something. You just have to have them walk into the ballot box going, I'm not really sure about this, but given the fact that there's nothing else on the ballot, that might just mean they stay home.
Right.
Because there's not another, maybe there are local elections, I'm not sure, but
I
there's
have to
not
tell you
any.
something. It
Yeah.
looks like I'm so sorry to say that my phone is dying. I need to find my charger.
That's okay. That's okay. Well, I've kept you so long. But so I think look, I think that if Newsom can give the fighting spirit to the Democrats in this time when they're feeling, a little bit low, I think that's great. I don't think that we should put the future of the Republic on the back of a social media team.
Right.
Right. That's not fair to them.
No matter how
And
good they are.
no matter how good they are. And as I have said previously, as somebody who spent the better part of the last 10 years fighting this guy, like Twitter is the beginning, right? Like being good on Twitter is the beginning of this. It's not the end of it. And so for me, what I would like to see, and I've talked to some people about this, is not just putting this in the context of there's nothing we can do until November of 2026, but what can blue states, or what I'm now calling free states, do as they did, let's say, what the Union did during the Civil War. The thing the blue states have going for them is all the frickin' people and all the money. and all the economic power. And Texas and Florida, I get, right? But the truth is that if the blue states wanted to start, if the Democratic-led states wanted to start some, mutual aid compact together, they could form a very powerful bloc just within the things that they can already do themselves, right? That
That would be
Alabama,
very cool.
Mississippi, Kentucky can never do. They don't have the capacity for it. They don't have the populations for it.
Okay.
Yeah. Hello.
I'm doing something so crazy right now. My charger won't go in.
Now, Kate, you just said Kate, you just said that Florida is a garbage state. Florida is not a garbage state. Florida is a beautiful place. So long as you're not there during hurricane season. It is a very hot place. But I spent all of my Thanksgivings in Florida. Oh, there she is.
Sorry.
That's
I don't
okay.
know what's happening.
That's okay. Listen, you know what? I mean, so long as somebody's not hungover, they're probably fine. So, all right. So, Jessica, I've kept you too long. So, give us a sense of, how do you unplug? And we got almost 1,300 people here, which is really cool. So, thank you guys, and it's all due to you, Jessica. So, thank you for joining me. So, how do you unplug? It is someone who has to deal with the news 7 days a week, who runs an organization that is dedicated to making sure people get unbalanced or unbiased, again, the scoop that they need to hear. How do you make sure you don't get overwhelmed?
What I do is I try to exercise a little bit every day. I play with my puppy, who is not a puppy, but he acts like a puppy, so I think of it in that way. It's funny.
What kind of dog is he?
He's a 12-pound Maltipoo, but he has a very big personality. His name is Bruno.
We'd have to.
Yeah. And he is not getting walked very much these days, so I'm working on that.
Does he need much of a walk at that point? At that sort of size point?
More. They're so hyper.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, he needs to get his woo out. So I
have 2 giant black labs, so they need to run all the time. So
it's the best. It's the best. And I try to see friends and get out of the house. I spend so much time on these devices and on like this remote stuff. I realize it's really important to have like in-person experiences with friends. So I work on that. I used to meditate. Haven't done that in months, so maybe that's going forward.
Yeah, well, next time we'll have like a guru on or something who can tell us how to do that. And look, I think you're right. I mean, the exercise, the rest. I mean, look, guys, what's good for you anyway is even better for you now, right? So if you're not getting enough sleep, get enough rest. If you're not exercising, exercise, right? If you need to see your friend, I mean, I'll tell you that. I mean, I had lunch with a couple of my buddies the other day, and I'll tell you that hour and 15 minutes, guys, like it's gold, right? We spent the entire time talking about, and this is, everybody's got their thing, right? Like if you could only see 2 bands, if there were 2 bands, 2 concerts you could go to in your life, what would they have been? Right. And that was an hour and 15 minutes over tacos. And it was the best it was the best hour and 15 minutes of the week. So, guys, you don't have to be prisoner to this stuff. And frankly, that's what they want. Right? They want you depressed. They want you dark. They want you feeling like it's all hopeless. It's going to be tough. We shouldn't deny that. But there is light out there, but it might take us a while to reach it. All right, Jessica, before I let you go, where can everybody find NNN? Where can they find you, and how can we make sure they sign up for you?
Thank you so much. You can find me here on Substack at News Not Noise. I send on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday and do interviews like this too. This is so fun to be on this side of it, Reed. And on Instagram at Jessica Yellin. We're also on YouTube at News Not Noise.
Awesome, guys. As always, you can find me here at the Homefront. Please check out the Homefront podcast, also on YouTube, wherever your favorite podcast could be found. Jessica, thanks for joining me.
Thank you so much. This was so fun. It's great to see you.
And everybody else, have a very safe and healthy and happy weekend, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.